Before we begin, thank you very much to the Desert Ruins Brawl for pitching in over on Ko-fi. Thank you very much for the direct contribution to the channel. Very, very appreciated. For everyone who wanted this to be like a big long streak, that's pretty much it. I'm caught up on those shoutouts now, so we can get back to a normal intro with the video count and everything starting tomorrow. But thank you very much for all of the support. It feels like it means so little when I say it so often, but it really does mean the world to me. So thank you everyone for helping out. So, it's June, and I have done a disservice by not really doing anything for Pride yet. So we need to do a little bit here to, just to be in the spirit of June. And we're going to focus on one of my favorite aspects, two of my favorite characters from IDW 1.0, and that would be the duo of Anode and Lug, for various reasons. I mean, this is one of those, like, comfort couples, like, when you read through IDW, like, there's so much chaos going on in More Than Meets the Eye and Lost Light. Like, when we get these two starting in Lost Light #1, it's just, like, comfy, like in the midst of all of this, chaos and war, near-death experiences, etc., you have this, like, perfect little bit of, like, love and care going on. And the story behind them is actually really, really cool. Like, it actually does do quite a lot, in universe especially. So we're going to discuss that for a bit, but let's get into, like, individual characters. For those who don't know Anode and Lug, we're going to go over this, and we'll go over their story for a little bit here, and why I like them, and why I think they stand out so much. So, Anode patterns herself as something of a treasure hunter, adventurer. She finds and recovers whatever kind of artifact that you have a need for. So a lot of her adventuring around the universe to some of the most dangerous sounding places in the entire galaxy, basically just got paid to go dig something up for somebody. It's a very much Lara Croft type. If Lara Croft was chased by gigantic, insane robots, I would play that Lara Croft game. I'm just saying. But that said, yeah, very brave sort, very reckless, but really good, witty personality to her. Like, she's a lot of fun to watch and just, like, see her antics. Her start, however, is not as this adventurer, treasure seeker. No, her story begins in a place called the Lighthouse. She was a blacksmith, one of those responsible for helping Sparks, especially the more struggling ones, shape their protoform into their very first form. And it's something she was proud of. It's something she bragged about a lot. And then when it came time to really show what she was made of in an emergency situation, she fails. So for all of her bragging, for all of her high talk, when it counted the most, she came up short. So even though the ones at the lighthouse are more apologetic and, like, they understand this happens, they're forgiving. Yes, a protoform died, but sometimes, it's not necessarily your fault. Anode takes it extremely hard, and instead of just quitting, because she can't bring herself to quit, so instead she falsifies some records to make it look like she was stealing the Sentio Metallico, the living metal that Transformers were made of, and then leaves, basically framing herself for a crime so they no longer want any part of her, which is a weird way to go about it. But also, I understand quitting, it means admitting that you also failed. So there's a part of her that couldn't come to terms with that yet. So it's a nice little wrinkle as an origin story, just to get her out into the universe and, establish her as this kind of, like, exploring adventurer type. But she's not alone in this venture. No. So this happened on Caminus. So they were already off Cybertron and all this, exploring the galaxy by this point. I say them because even before leaving Cybertron, Lug was already in the picture. Lug is the wife, and Lug is oddly enough a backpack transformer, which is weird. Anode is a biplane, which is awesome because we don't have very many of those. We've already talked about biplanes more than once in this month in Transformers. And don't tell me, yes, I know Starscream is the new Starscream toy is a flying wing Da Vinci type thing. It's a plane with 4 wings. Leave me alone. This one's a good biplane. This one is an actual biplane though. Lug is the backpack she carries around. Lug is a geologist, and as such, much more practical, much more level-headed than Anode, but the two are very much a couple. They are very much like, where you go, I will go. And they strike a very, very fun chord as, like the more daring of the couple and the more practical of the couple is just creating this fun little mesh. The banter between them is fantastic, and Lug keeps up with all of it. Very much the type of like, I hate what you're doing, but I desperately love you, so I'm going through with this anyway. This is stupid. What you're doing is stupid. I'm down. That type. But the two play off each other really, really well. They are fun to see bantering. What I like about them so much is that between all like the adventuring, the artifact finding and all that, they represent something of a weird gray area amongst Autobots. Ultimately, once they join the Lost Light, they're Autobot aligned. However, in the midst of this, they are still kind of self-serving. They have no qualms over things like stealing, and if one steals for the other has no issue with it whatsoever. They got a fun shiny. That's all they care about. So it's interesting. If you notice me and the characters I tend to talk about, I love those gray areas. I love those gray areas of like characters like G1 Blitzwing in his final episode, characters like Beast Wars Dinobot, Earthspark Tarantulas, I absolutely love too. I like when you're showing me that it's not just good versus evil. That like there are people who carry Decepticon beliefs who aren't necessarily evil. And we saw that with characters like Thundercracker and the Scavengers. And with the Autobots, okay, we have some who might fit in well with the Decepticons. Like, Prowl comes to mind on that one. But not necessarily like, oh, they would fit in with Decepticons, but just like, they are not necessarily completely good people, like, there's shade, there's different morals amongst them. Even though they share the Autobot ideals or mission, they have their own morals, and they also, like, they don't really, like, adhere to little silly things like, oh, I don't know, the law. I like showing those gray areas. I like seeing that. And IDW was great at showing that, like, just because they're an Autobot doesn't necessarily mean they're completely good. There's differences. It makes them feel more human, and I like that. Also, I mentioned the banter. Yeah, little example for you. The panel on the right, this lives rent-free in my head. This is a panel I can send to any friend who's intentionally being annoying and trolly as if they think it is absolutely hysterical. It is a perfect reaction image. It's an absolutely perfect reaction image. But what you see here is the adventure where we first see them. That snowflake that I showed you, that is a little bloom of Sentio Metallico. That's what was recovered during the first time we had seen these two in the start of Lost Light issue 1. And then, after an appearance from the Necrobot, who has a tendency established a tendency to try and rescue bots before their imminent death, we see him do it for Anode and Lug. And they wake up when the Lost Light crew has dealt with the DJD, and things on the Necro world are starting to come out of their stasis pods, having woken back up and rejoining the living world. All the bots that the Necrobot managed to save from what fate was supposed to tell as an inevitable death. So, Anode and Lug, get to join the crew. And they make a fun addition, you know? And again, they are treated very well. At this point, it's important to point out that throughout More Than Meets the Eye, and then, of course, Lost Light, you have running romances going throughout the story. And that's a really rare thing for Transformers to approach the topic of romance. Beast Wars and Beast Machines did it a little, did it, obviously. It very rarely comes up in any other series, you know. But in this case, they ran with it. There's just a lot of love stories going on, but they all have their own flavors, you know. So you got Tailgate and Cyclonus. That's your slow burn, will they, won't they? And during the Lost Light run is where all that was coming to a head and getting really, really intense. And then you have Rewind and Chrome Dome, who were the long established couple that entered the story, who were already conjunct Sindura. They're already husbands, but there is a deep underlying issue that's going on that has to get addressed, and it only gets addressed after one dies. And then it's still kind of like and even after Rewind comes back to life, it colors their relationship and how they approach each other a little bit. So so you have these two different stories going on at the same time. And then you just have these two who just seem like everything is perfectly fine. They are absolutely happy with each other. They are basically one and the same. The early issues we see them in, the first 4, treat them basically like one character. One attached to the hip of the other. The only drama we actually see between the two is when Lug finds out exactly why Anode left the lighthouse in the first place. So that kind of drove a bit of a wedge, more because Anode lied about it more than anything. But it's just after this we find out the big twist. Who has seen The Sixth Sense? Because as it turns out, ever since they woke up with the crew of the Lost Light, ever since they woke up on Necro World, Lug's been dead. The manifestation that we've seen on frame as Lug, that was just a manifestation of Anode's brain recovering from the sickness that comes with long-term hibernation. They're in that chamber for about 500 years. So basically, Anode was hallucinating, and anytime we saw Lug in the frame of a comic page, it was Anode imagining them there. So that gets creepy. So Anode has been talking to a ghost this whole time, and then you do come to this realization, so Lug did die. The Necrobot only saved one of them. Now, we'll get to that in a bit. It's hard to kill a Transformer. But when you realize this little fact, it makes so much sense of what was happening before. So the first 4 issues would be packed with scenes like this, where Lug was Lug was talking, but no one was really answering exactly what Lug said. They were all answering Anode, but Anode was always talking after Lug, so that didn't seem like it was completely out of place. It more just felt like Lug was letting Anode do the talking because Anode is the louder of the two, and that's just kind of how the dynamic works. And it's really clever when you go back and read those first 4 issues of these two characters and realize no one is addressing Lug. It feels like they're in the story. It feels like they're actually there, but we know they're not. And it makes everything feel very different. It's very clever writing. It's exceptionally clever writing. Now, something the Necrobot does is when someone passes away with them, the Necrobots saved the last remnants of their spark to put onto their blue flower. The big thing on Necro World, for those who didn't read IDW, is the fact that when a Transformer passes, a blue flower is placed in their name, in their memory. And this one just happened to be sprinkled with the last remnants of Lug's spark. meaning Lug is barely, but still technically alive. That little snowflake of Sentio Metallico, that gets combined with the remnants of the spark, and now Anode makes up for her past mistake by using those two elements to bring Lug back to life. And not only does this, kind of show how hard it is to kill a Transformer for good, it is very, very difficult, but also, we learn a few things here. For instance, Lug, in her brand new body, knows everything. She has full memory of her life up until her actual death. And that tells you a lot about just how the spark works, and, how much gets backed up and how much of the Transformers being really is the spark rather than the components that make up their brain, for instance. So that's incredibly informative about how Transformers work, at least in the IDW universe. And it raises the importance of the spark itself. The entirety of the being is the spark. And we've kind of seen aspects of that, like Beast Machines kind of use that. Beast Wars a little bit, though Tigerhawk didn't have the most exact memories. But it's an interesting thing to establish in the comic book universes. Also, I'm just going to say this because this is not really a thing, but it's something that you can take away from this. The fact that Anode could have shaped Lug into anything, but decided to keep them as exact as they originally were, tells you just how much Anode loved Lug exactly as she was. Like, there was no reason to make an ideal version here or anything stylized. No, just exactly who I wanted. My wife. Exactly. It's this nice little moment. And again, they just get to be this nice little couple on the way back. And now Lug actually exists and people are interacting with her, which is crazy. The great thing about this, once Lug is back online, the first thing Anode does is come clean about what happened to the lighthouse. And the exact opposite reaction happens. They're just a loving couple. Like, there's no drama, no turmoil. And that's what I liked about these two. I understand. Without that kind of drama, without the will they, won't they, or, oh, this is a big thing, I wonder when this is coming up. Without that, yeah, you aren't getting quite as much drama. You're not getting quite as much intrigue. But also, sometimes I just want the characters I like to be happy, in the midst of two different relationships being focused on, especially around this time, how, like, dire things were getting between Tailgate and Cyclonus. This is just a nice little comfort zone to, like, here's this nice, healthy relationship that even when a problem is perceived, isn't actually a problem. These two are just hopelessly in love with each other, and that's, it's just comforting. It's just nice and comforting is what it is. And yeah, there is the pink, blue, and white elephant in the room. Because, yeah, if you've gotten this far in without knowing anything about them other than they are two girls who are married, then congratulations. You've kept yourself blissfully unaware. So, yeah, it's a lesbian couple. But also, when they were on Cybertron, this was after the initial departure of the planet from all the females, meaning on Cybertron, they were male. And they had already gotten together. And then when they left Cybertron, discovered what females were, and realized, I think I'd actually be more comfortable female, they both made that change. Anode changed by literally having her structure change into a feminine form, and Lug changing pronouns. And that's it. So you have a gay couple, one who fully transitioned, so a pre-op and a post-op technically, and then both were lesbians later on. I feel like the writers of this comic book were just, one, to show you how silly it is to get worked up over these things, because they are the same people no matter what gender norms that they're applying to themselves, but also they're still just really good characters regardless of this, and that's kind of how real life works too. I don't care if you want to be called he, she, or them. You know, what matters to me is that you're a good person. And yes, they have gray areas. They're ultimately good people, you know? And I really feel like the two were designed this way. Just like take that one sector of the fandom who just has a problem with the LGBT and just tell them, get out. This is not for you. You are not wanted here. This is like bug repellent. Just go. Get away. And like the pests they are, go. I kind of use this same way. I'm not scared of broaching topics like this. I'm really not, because like I'm fully supportive. I think I've done a good job at like nurturing a community that is more acceptant and more inclusive. And for most of you, that's perfectly fine. But there's always a sect of the fandom who's going to be against this, despite, the whole freedom is the right of all sentient beings thing. And some people in this fandom don't quite agree with that, apparently. I don't know how you're a fan of Transformers for this long. Hear and see what Optimus Prime does and says and goes, I don't agree with that, but I still like Optimus Prime. Media literacy. Learn something. Crying out loud. And yeah, I'm just going to tell you right now in the comment section, if you went straight to the comments to like whine and complain about this being woke or whatever, you're just getting blocked and banned, So do us all a favor. Mind your own business. We're having fun here. I'm talking about two characters who I absolutely adore, who I thought were a lot of fun and didn't get nearly enough of a run. Like I would have taken a lot more time with these two. I would have loved to see them in a future comic book series. Where is my toy? Where is my Voyager class Anode and Lug? Because you're not going to sell them separately. They have to come as a pair. That's just how this works. Someday. They got to be on a list somewhere for an eventual anything. But that's me discussing. I just wanted to gush today. I just kind of felt like gushing about one of my favorite parts of IDW that, frankly, I don't think a lot of people talk about. I think when it comes to the romances, people get lost in Cyclonus and Tailgate more than anything. And then this one kind of goes under the radar, but I think that's because it is the comfort couple. It is just like the nice two people whose chemistry is perfect, whose antics are a lot of fun to watch, and whose relationship is just refreshing and peaceful. And sometimes you need that. Sometimes you just need that little bit of perspective behind it. So that is me. That is me. Giving the month of June just a little bit of credit. I should have given it more this month. It's kind of gotten away from me. But there you go. So that's what I have for you today. Thank you everyone for watching. I will see you next time.
Hello everyone, I am Astral Agent Magnetar, a Tokusatsu VTuber, and I am streaming 4 times a week over on Twitch, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday afternoons, and a special late night one on late Friday/early Saturday. So come watch, come hang out, and let's make an impact together.